It was now the Great Depression, with Edison not sending Atticus money. The power and water were turned off indefinitely. There was a job shortage, so he was having a hard time finding work. Without Miss Charlene or Nellie, the townhouse was in disarray. He was unable to clean the dishes, and he was only able to make one hot meal a day. It was a rough time for Atticus to navigate as only a teenager. Tommy had not been to visit in months. His father hit him for cutting back shifts because every paycheck went into his father's pocket. They wrote often that Atticus missed him very much. To help with the loneliness, Atticus adopted a dog. It was not the right choice financially, but it was the best choice for him right now. He was unbearably lonely. He named the dog Milo and immediately bonded with him. Milo was a finicky dog and normally didn't like other humans, but he warmed to Atticus immediately. They were meant for each other. Atticus treated the dog like a best friend. Atticus splurged on the best dog food for Milo even though he barely had enough money to survive. Although they bonded immediately, Milo was still weary of his owner. He had not lived a happy life thus far. Atticus could feel Milo's pain, and he related to it. It made him love the dog even more. Their favorite thing to do together was take a walk. It got Atticus out of his dreadful townhouse, and it helped him to bond with Milo. Atticus's loneliness had subsided some since adopting Milo, but he still very much missed Tommy. Tommy appeared at the townhouse sometime later, beaten and bloody at the hands of his father. He was in a bad way. When Atticus let the other boy inside, he broke down in tears. He uttered that he told his father that he would never take a wife. Atticus sobbed at the sight of the love of his life. He knew Tommy's father did this because he suspected that he liked boys. Atticus hurt for him. Atticus lovingly caressed Tommy's cheek and told him he was safe here. He could live there for as long as he wanted. Tommy thanked him profusely and hugged Atticus despite his aching body. He felt safe with him always. Tommy was exhausted from all the traveling and heartbroken by what his father did, so Atticus held him as he slept. He wanted to keep Tommy safe at all costs. He loved him so much. He didn't deserve the treatment he received. Atticus cooked the one hot meal he was allowed a day to feed Tommy. He and his father were really struggling financially, so Atticus knew that Tommy was starving. It wasn't much, but he figured Tommy would appreciate it regardless. Tommy was very grateful for the hospitality and the kindness that Atticus had shown him. He would never be able to repay him for the love, safety, and acceptance that he felt under this roof. Atticus was over the moon that Tommy would be staying with him for the foreseeable future. Tommy attempted to clean the dirty dishes without water. It didn't work very well, but he made do. He wouldn't live with Atticus without pulling his weight. Living with each other was just what they needed. They made each other laugh, and they felt like children again. In the townhouse, age and responsibilities didn't matter. They could be silly and in love while not being judged. However, the amazing part about being teens was that they were able to physically express all the emotions they were feeling as children. They were young and in love. Life felt perfect in their little bubble. Atticus knew that Tommy was his soulmate. Life would be happy and tolerable as long as he was in it. His life had largely been sad, but with Tommy, he found happiness and sunshine. Atticus and Tommy settled into domestic bliss. Atticus liked to read magazines while Tommy studied for his exit exam so that he could graduate early. Atticus was very supportive of this. Things often got hot and heavy between the two. They were waiting to be intimate with one another, but they did what felt good and natural. Passionate kissing was what felt good to them. With Atticus's urging, the couple returned to Henford on Baku so they could go back to their spot and spend time in the lake. Tom was worried because he didn't want his father to find him. Atticus eased Tommy's worries by kissing him. As long as they were together, no one could hurt them. Life was good for Atticus and Tom. They felt the many emotions of being back in the place they met. Their lives were infinitely better because they were together. Atticus loved Tommy so deeply. He was his everything, and he was so happy to have the chance to love him. Atticus left Tommy wading in the water because he had to look for a job. He was very happy that Tommy was living with him, but without his father's payments. They couldn't afford to live in the townhouse. After much pleading to the supervisor, Atticus secured a job as a manual laborer. Milo impatiently waited for his owners to return to the townhouse. He was wary of humans but adored Atticus. Although Atticus just landed a job, he was not going to make the next payments to tend to the townhouse. He wrote to his father and pleaded with him to send money. He hated to beg his father for money, but he was desperate. He had a life in the townhouse with Tommy, and he didn't want to give it up. Reluctantly, he needed his father's help. Atticus meditated often. He felt a deep sense of anxiety by asking his father for anything, since Edison never gave him anything during his entire life. Atticus needed guidance. Because Atticus spent much of his time meditating, Milo's immediate needs were not being met. He needed someone to take him outside to go potty. Tom tried his hardest to bond with Milo. The dog was so bonded so deeply to the love of his life. He needed to win the dog over. To help with that bond, he started to throw a ball back and forth with Milo. Milo went wild for playing catch with Tom. He warmed to Tom quickly after that, and even revered him as his second owner. This became their daily routine while Atticus was at work. The fireflies were out and about during the springtime in Henford on Bagley. Tommy took Atticus to the spot where they spent much of their time together as children. The area was beautifully lit from the fireflies. The couple looked up at the stars and marveled at the view. They talked about their future together with excitement now, not dread. Atticus decided that he wanted to promise himself to Tommy. He was the love of his life, and even if they couldn't legally get married, he wanted to give him a physical representation of his love. Atticus found one of his mother's old rings and thought it was perfect for Tommy. It was subtle, yet beautiful. The newly promised couple kissed under the glow of the mixture of stars and fireflies. Atticus knew that he would remember this moment for the rest of his life. Tommy was his, and he was Tommy's. Forever. Tom took Atticus in his arms and began to dance with him. His mother had taught him when she was not bedridden. She told him that the key to anyone's heart was dancing together without music. Tom had to admit that his mother was correct. He had never felt closer to Atticus than in this moment. He was so lucky for his love and knew that this spot would always be their special place, just for them and their love. Atticus and Tommy laid there together for the rest of the evening. They envisioned a life where they could love each other freely and have a family of their own. It was always too good to be true, though. Atticus received a letter from Edison with the exact amount of money for Atticus to keep the townhouse. Nothing more, nothing less. He gave no warm regards to his son from Sulani. Atticus read his father's words and felt nothing but anger and resentment towards him. Edison spoke of love and warmth toward his daughter. Atticus had a sister named Claudine, and he would never meet her because Edison didn't want that. Atticus would never understand why he was so unlovable to his father. And yet his half-sister was given every opportunity for their father's love. Summer came and went, and the weather started to get colder. Both boys were now 16 years old, and Tommy suggested that they drink for the first time together to see what it felt like. The lovebirds felt like rebellious teenagers. They had been in survival mode for nearly 2 years, and they forgot that they were still kids and should enjoy their lives to the fullest. Tommy was a big fan of Edison's wine stash, but Atticus felt as though it left much to be desired. The liquor reminded him too much of his father's indifference towards him. They played cards together after the alcohol was coursing through their bodies. Tommy turned out to be incredibly competitive and beat Atticus every game. Little did Tom know, Atticus had read several books on poker and knew exactly what he was doing. He let his boyfriend win because he loved to see him smile. Atticus went on an alcohol-induced rant after they came downstairs to their bedroom. He was worried that Edison would stop sending him money for expenses before he aged into a young adult. Tommy assured him that if that were to happen, they would run away together and live off the land someplace where they could love each other safely. They would be okay as long as they were together. Atticus clung to his boyfriend. He was always so calm and collected. He appreciated how easily Tommy could set his mind at ease. He was his voice of reason and made him feel comfortable. Tom fell more in love with Atticus every day. He loved his quirks and the way he needed him. Tom didn't need many things in life. He was a simple man, but he needed Atticus's love. Atticus was happy to give Tommy every ounce of love he had. Their love was special. Weeks later, Atticus brushed and petted his best pal, Milo, and got him ready for their daily walk. Their walks were less and less frequent due to Atticus's work schedule. Edison returns to his townhouse with the intention of moving back in. Things with Nellie and his daughter had gone south, so he was in an extra sour mood. He was not expecting to see the house in ruin and Thomas Barton living there. Edison was outraged and disgusted. Edison screamed obscenities and very hurtful comments at Tom. Tom tried to excuse his reasoning for being at the townhouse. Edison knew the real reason. His son was a fruit and it was Tom's fault. Edison told the boy that if he did not vacate the premises immediately, he would physically punish him. Tom was reminded of his father, so he agreed to leave. Atticus returned to the townhouse as Tommy was grabbing his things to leave. Atticus was enraged that his father had the audacity to barge in after barely speaking to him for 2.5 years and banish the one person that makes him happy. Edison screams at his son, and he would not allow this disgusting sin against nature to stand under his roof. Edison pushes Atticus with great force and tells him he is an abomination, and if he wouldn't stop being gay then he wasn't welcome in his home. Atticus refused to say he would marry a woman, so his father threatened him. Edison stood firmly behind his words and shoot his fake son away, telling him to only return if he agreed to take a wife. Atticus promised he would never return. Edison was heartbroken about Nellie and his daughter no longer being in his life, but found comfort that he was rid of Atticus. Atticus and Tom fled to Henford on Bagley. Tom was very familiar with the woods in that area and was confident they could survive off the land there, at least for a little while they get their bearings. Atticus had lived a sheltered life. Other than exploring the forest when he was with Tommy, Atticus was out of his depth in nature. Tom apologized to Atticus for ruining his life and begged for his forgiveness. He felt terrible about how things unfolded with Edison. Atticus felt the apology unnecessary. His father was wrong for the things he said to Tommy. There was nothing wrong or sinful about their love for each other. It was the one good thing they had. Together, they could conquer anything. Tom looked into Atticus's eyes and felt at home. They kissed for a moment, but this kiss felt different. This event caused them to grow up quickly. They were men now. They felt overcome with emotion for one another and wanted to express it. Tom spread a blanket on the ground for he and his love to lay on. They had waited for years to be intimate with each other, but they were almost 17 and it felt right. It was them against the world, Atticus knew he would never love anyone like he loved Tommy, and he wanted to share his first time with him. He was his best friend and his soulmate. Both were nervous and tentative in their kisses and touches, but their primal instincts kicked in and both were filled with deep desire and longing. The anticipation for this moment had been years in the making. Atticus and Tommy made love that night underneath the glowing stars of Henford-on-Bagley. Atticus would remember this moment for the rest of his life. Tommy and Atticus settled into their new living situation rather seamlessly. It felt like one of their old monthly visits, but every day. It felt both nostalgic and new and exciting at the same time. Tom found one of his old fishing poles in the forest, so he started fishing for their food. They were living on the land, in every form of the phrase. If Tom didn't catch anything, they didn't eat for the day. He was determined. Atticus took it upon himself to build the fire every day to cook their meals. He was not in his element in nature like Tommy was, but he wanted to be helpful when he could. He cooked the fish that Tommy caught for the day and made sure they had a delicious meal to eat. He was uncomfortable in the wilderness, but it was worth it to be free with Tommy. Tommy liked to lay on the ground while Atticus was cooking to really soak up the fact that they were together and free. Atticus gave up his entire life for him. Atticus really loved him. Milo was happy to be out in nature. He was much less finicky being out in the fresh air. Atticus leaned on him for comfort when he missed home. Tom was very appreciative of his boyfriend cooking the fish he catches. They had opposite strengths, and that was one reason they worked so well together. The food that Atticus cooked always tasted good. It made braving the outdoors much less stressful for them both. Their situation would only be temporary once they figured out where to go, where it would be safe to love. They often tried to brainstorm ideas on where they might move to and what they would do for work. They were optimistic, however. Every idea was squashed because Atticus had read an article about harm to gays in each city. Suggestion. Because Atticus ran away from his life in Del Sol Valley, he effectively quit his job. Tommy sometimes went to town in Henford-on-Bagley to search for work. They desperately needed money if they were going to make it. Atticus would never tell his love, but he was growing increasingly weary of their plans together. He loved Tommy more than anything in the world, but they couldn't live like this forever. They needed jobs, money, shelter, and security. Atticus was unsure that they would be given any of those things if they tried to live as a gay couple. Wherever they went, Atticus was scared for the future. On special occasions, Tom was able to barter a slab of meat in exchange for the fish he had caught. Atticus was proud of him, but grew more concerned about their living conditions as each week passed by. As autumn was turning into winter, Atticus expressed his concerns to his boyfriend. It was hard for him to be honest about his dissatisfaction for living in the wilderness because he loved Tommy and wanted to be with him. Tom reassured Atticus that this arrangement would only be temporary and they would soon find a place to stay. Deep down, Tom was also worried for the impending winter. Winters in Henford-on-Bagley were rough, and Tom was worried that they could potentially freeze to death. He didn't want to give up on their future together and the only happiness he ever experienced. The fire became their solace. Frigid nights became a daily occurrence. Both boys had grown out their facial hair to keep warm. Tommy tried his best to keep Atticus happy. He was holding on to the little morsel of hope that they could make this work. Atticus would be taken care of by his father. Tommy had everything to lose without his love. Tom whispered sweet nothings to Atticus as they silently swayed together. Their dancing was partly to keep warm, but mostly because they knew that this could end at any moment. The nights were the worst for the two boys. They struggled to stay warm, and the little sleep they did get was restless. Atticus reluctantly dreamed of his warm bed in Del Sol Valley. He was losing hope. Milo was a faithful dog to the Tabos. He slept close to them in case another homeless person tried to rob their camp. He was protective. Atticus still tried to take Milo on walks. He did this mostly for himself, to stay warm and to have a semblance of normalcy. Tom had yet to find work and was not having luck with fishing. Out of desperation, he searched trash cans around town for scraps of food. He kept this a secret from Atticus and presented the food he found in the trash as a gift from a kind townie. Tommy was so desperate to keep Atticus. He couldn't bear it if Atticus decided to return home. Despite their dim prospects for a life together, Tom was happy because he had Atticus. He would put on a brave face and soak up every moment he had left with him, if their days were numbered. Atticus had the same mindset. He loved Tommy so much and knew that he would never feel like this ever again. He savored every kiss with Tommy like it was their last. He hoped they would find a way out of this mess. Despite the frigid temperature and snow now falling on the ground, the lovebirds expressed their love for each other. There were few ways to keep warm, but they made do. Atticus welcomed the nice distraction from the cold and their lack of plans. He didn't know that another person could make him feel so good. Although the snow was sticking and continuing to fall, they made the best of their situation. Tommy found fun and romantic ways to spend their days. They had been living together in the wilderness for 3.5 months, but for Tom, it felt like no time at all. Every moment he spent with Atticus was worth it. He would suffer every day if it meant they could be together. Atticus was miserable in the cold, but Tommy's gleaming smile and warm kiss helped him feel better. He left home for a good reason, so he had to make this work. Atticus was so grateful that Tommy showed him how to love and be loved in return. It was a blessing every day that Tommy loved him. Atticus was starting to really worry about Milo. He was beginning to lose weight and shivered often. He tried to keep his dog warm, to no avail. Milo was not made for this weather, and that scared Atticus. Tom received harsh burns after accidentally lighting himself on fire. They had exhausted all of their first aid supplies and had no money to treat the burn. Tom was in great pain but suffered in silence to not alarm Atticus. Food was becoming scarce because the pond had iced over and Tom could not fish. They were hungry and freezing. Some days, all they had the energy for was to forage for berries or catch small animals. They spent much of their time in their sleeping bags trying to keep warm and struggling to stay asleep. Their situation was turning dire.